Acknowledged as one of the finest musicians that the British Isles has ever produced, and with a career that dated back to the 1960s, there were few musical genres that Gary Moore had not turned his adroit musical hand to. Gracing the lineups of several notable rock bands, Thin Lizzy, Colosseum 2 and the original Skid Row in his time, he also established himself as a world-class guitarist with few equals. Gary was born in Belfast, Northern Ireland on the 4th of April 1952. Like many others, he was turned on to rock and roll through first hearing Elvis Presley and then via the Beatles. Seeing the likes of Jimi Hendrix and John Mayall's Blues Breakers in his hometown in the mid-60s opened him up to a rich world of the blues. Hearing the art of the blues guitar performed by such lauded exponents as Peter Green fired Moore's nascent talent, and it wasn't long before he was being hailed as a teen musical prodigy. Indeed, it was Green himself who helped foster Moore's career, a debt that was handsomely repaid when Gary cut his warm, heartfelt tribute to his mentor, the Blues for Greenie album released in 1995. Gary's first band of note, the power trio Skid Row, secured a record deal with CBS label in 1970. By this time, Gary had moved to Dublin and befriended a certain Philip Lynott, who filled the vocal role with Skid Row until shortly before the CBS deal was signed. Gary cut 3 albums with the band and toured the USA supporting the Allman Brothers Band and Mountain, among others, before he left Skid Row to embark on a solo career. This proved short-lived as Gary was soon to reunite with Phil Lynott as a replacement for Eric Bell in the Thin Lizzy lineup. Although he was in the band for a relatively brief tenure, he would rejoin their ranks following the departure of Brian Robertson in 1977, and again finally as a full band member for the Black Rose album and tour in 1978. In 1979, Gary's solo career began in earnest with the evocative hit single Parisian Walkways, which pitched Gary's tasteful blues-soaked lead guitar with a moody Phil Lynott guest vocal. The single reached the UK top 10 in April of that year, and the subsequent album Back on the Streets was similarly well received. The late 1970s and early 80s were characterised by Gary's restless search for the best musical settings for his talents. A reunion with Phil Lynott produced the powerful Out in the Fields hit single in 1985. He explored his Celtic roots on the album Wild Frontier in 1987, but it was with his 1990 album Still Got the Blues that Gary arrived at a rich musical vein within which his creativity could flow freely. And its successor, After Hours, saw cameo appearances from the likes of blues guitar greats as Albert King, B.B. King and Albert Collins, and is a testament to Gary's own remarkable talents that he more than held his own amongst such august company. In 1994, Gary worked alongside Ginger Baker and Jack Bruce in the BBM, cutting one accomplished album before resuming his solo career. The Back to the Blues 2001 album saw him revisit the blues with renewed vigour and determination after the more experimental Dark Days in Paradise from 1997 and A Different Beat in 1999, those albums. A 10-track collection that mixed excellent Moore originals with gritty and intense standard covers, but in the tradition keeping his fans and critics guessing. 2002 saw Gary crashing back onto the music scene with what had to be his heaviest collection of songs since the late 1980s, once again forcing people to reassess any opinions and preconceptions that they might have had of him. That time round, though, Moore had decided to share the limelight, joining forces with ex-Skunk Anansie bassist Cass Lewis and Primal Scream drummer Darren Mooney from Scars, a true power trio in every respect. The Scars album was completed in early 2002, and that lineup then went on to record the Live at the Monsters of Rock 2003 live CD and DVD, which featured the band's set as performed on 2 separate nights on the UK tour in May 2003. That live set encompassed a diverse range of material across Gary's playing career. 2004 saw possibly the rawest album yet with Power of the Blues. The 10-track set, recorded mostly live in the studio, ranged from the hard rock blues of the title track via the upbeat swing of Can't Find My Baby to the haunting Torn Inside. Taking time out in August 2005 for a brief reunion with former Thin Lizzy members for a one-off concert in Dublin to mark the occasion of Phil Lynot's birth, the evening was filmed at 2006 DVD release, Gary Moore and Friends One Night in Dublin, a tribute to Phil Lynott. With his 2007 studio album Close As You Get, Gary continued in a direction not too dissimilar from Old New Ballads Blues, released in 2006, mixing original tunes with some interesting blues covers that Gary had rediscovered while researching for his award-winning radio series Blues Power for Planet Rock. September 2008 saw the release of what would turn out to be Gary's last studio album, Bad For You Baby. Again, a powerful collection of tracks mixing original material and selected blues covers. After being on the road for most of 2008 and into 2010 with the blues lineup of touring band, Gary returned from a tour of Russia and the Far East and decided to reunite with his old sparring partner from the rock lineup of the 1980s, Neil Carter. The plan was to put together a rock lineup and dust off a selection of tracks from the mid to late 80s, adding John Noyce, ex-Jethro Tull, on bass, someone who was also part of the One Night in Dublin tribute DVD in 2005, and Darren Mooney, Primal Scream Stroke Sessions, on drums, who was no stranger to the touring and recording lineup in the late 90s and early 2000s. This lineup hit the road in May of 2010, performing a live set based around a selection of tracks from Gary's rock years of the 1980s. This proved to be a real treat for fans old and new, as many would not have heard Gary play these songs live either for a very long time, or in many cases at all. In addition to the older tunes, a number of new Celtic rock style tracks were included in the show, which went down very well with live audiences. Tracks which Gary was planning to record and embellish on his next studio project. A project that was ready to start when Gary returned from a short holiday break. Unfortunately, that was not meant to be, as Gary passed away in his sleep in the early hours of the 6th of February 2011 in Estepona, Spain. After being such a force of nature in the guitar-playing firmament as part of his professional career that began when he was only 16, he leaves behind a huge hole for many, not just his close family and friends, but guitar fans around the world. All of the many tributes paid to Gary since his passing, maybe this one from Gary's friend and musical collaborator Don Airey might sum up the best of most people's thoughts of Gary. He says, "At the 1984 Donington Festival, during the long solo in Empty Rooms, the previously restless crowd went so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Everyone backstage and behind the scenes stopped whatever they were doing and just stood to listen open-mouthed. His artistry touched thousands of people over the years, not least those of us lucky enough to have shared a stage or recording studio with him. Sleep tight, old mate, you'll be sorely missed."